kick this meeting off, welcoming everyone this morning on March the 11th in these tumultuous times to the General and Finance Committee meeting at the Township of Muskoka Lakes. There is no supplementary agenda, as I'm aware of. Is there any disclosure of pecuniary interest from any of the committee members? Okay, fine. So our first invited delegation is Jody from the Muskoka Rock Minor Hockey Communications. Go ahead, come on up.
Good morning. Welcome. My name is Jody Gilles. I'm the Director of Communications for Muskoka Rock Minor Hockey. I have been with Muskoka Rock for 2 years. My daughter's played for 3. I'm here today to request a forgiving of ice rentals for an event we would like to host on March 28th at 7 p.m., which is a hockey game against the Muskoka Rock alumni and current coaches versus the Township of Muskoka Lakes firefighters. We had a similar event over the Winterfest weekend where a game took place, a very similar action. We asked for food donations as entry, and we raised just over $100 on 50-50 tickets. What I loved most about it was seeing our little guys, meaning our initiation-aged players, 4, 5, and 6, which is where our club is really focusing because they are our future, watching their dads and their coaches play hockey, like hearing them cheer them on, there was nothing like it. They had never seen their dads play, some of them, my coach included, Coach Wallace. His son hadn't seen him play. And for him and his daughter to see that happen and hearing the kids cheering them on from the stands, just like us hockey moms cheer on from the stands. It was just really heartwarming. And it was just a great community feeling. The support was there. Moms and dads of the coaches came, just like they did when they were little. Sparky was there, which was a huge hit for the kids. I think every kid wanted a picture with Sparky. I do have a picture somewhere here of kind of the end of what it kind of looked like. It was just, like I said, a really great community feeling, and we would like to do that again on March 28th. There's Sparky and Jenna Marshallton from the firefighters. It's a beautiful day outside, so it's a little hard to see, but it was just community spirit at its best. So that's what we're asking, to have the ice time waived so that we can host this event and make some money 50-50 wise for the West Muskoka Food Bank, as well as food donations.
Thank you very much.
Welcome.
Excellent event. So I would ask the committee if there's any questions of Jody before we sort of look at this ourselves as a group. Any questions? Phil? Sorry, Mayor?
Thanks, Jody. So what's the date you want to do this again, and what's the date you did this already?
March 28th at 7 p.m.
Okay.
And we did it at Winterfest. So
Okay.
I believe Winterfest funds paid for the ice there, Phil.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, good to know. Any other questions, thoughts? Okay, thank you, Jody.
Thank you so much.
So I think, as I indicated to you earlier, there is an item of a more fulsome scale on the agenda for a little later after the delegation. So it may come into that discussion. So if it serves your purposes, it certainly would serve ours to have someone at staff get back to you. If you want to say, you're certainly welcome. But so go ahead, Councillor Hayes.
Question through you to Jody. Are you going to be charging admission to go to the game?
No, we will not. It will just be food donation, by donations to the West Muskoka Food Bank.
Good.
Great question.
Any other
Thank
questions?
you for asking that.
Good, thank you.
Thank you so much.
Okay,
Enjoy your
thank
day.
you. Okay, so do we as a committee want to discuss this particular ask here and now, or do we want to wait until 5A, which I know I may be overreaching a little bit, but that is community centers, but I think it speaks to facilities and use of facilities and fees around that. Can we have a discussion? Councillor Nishikawa?
Thank you.
I don't see this as part of the discussion about community centers, just in, so I think it could be dealt with now, if you had a resolution or something. Is that what you were suggesting?
Thank you. I would ask the other committee members to chime in on that. Councilor
Like
Kelly?
me specifically? Yeah.
Please.
Thank you. Through you, or to you, we're going to have the same discussion twice if we don't postpone. To my way of thinking, you might as well just put it off till we get to 5A and deal with it sort of more generically.
Thank you. Others? Okay, is that? Okay, good. Okay, then we're gonna move on to 4B on our agenda. We're gonna call on Colleen Kennedy from Safe Quiet Lakes to present to us a pilot project.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for allowing us to be here. My name is Colleen Kennedy, and I live at 248 Delaware in Toronto, but in the summer, I summer on Mirror Lake, and one of my first jobs was working for the township teaching swimming down at Hannah Park. So thank you for setting me on a good career trajectory. But today, I take this opportunity to speak to you as a director of Safe Quiet Lakes. We are a volunteer organization that was formed in 2011 with a mission to make the Muskoka Lakes safer and quieter, and to ensure sustainable enjoyment of our treasured shared resource. Safe Quiet Lakes is asking for your help with addressing unsafe and noisy boating in Muskoka, starting with a pilot project around wakes and speeds, where we are partnering with the Muskoka Lakes Association, and I'm thankful that the mayor met with us a few weeks ago to discuss our ideas as well. As you are likely aware, Transport Canada has authority to regulate boating on our lakes and rivers, and in the early 1970s, the Muskoka Lakes Association was the driving force behind the federal government imposing a speed limit on the Muskoka Lakes, and coming out of the faster and bigger boats of the affluence of the 1960s. The speed limit of 9 kilometers an hour within 30 meters of the shore was adopted to make sure that people were safer on or in the water, reduce wake damage to our shoreline, and minimize noise for people on the shore. 40 years later, noisy and fast boats and the damage caused by their wakes continues to be a key concern. 2 comprehensive surveys conducted by Safe Quiet Lakes made it clear that enjoyment of our lakes is directly related to safety, noise, and boat traffic. Only 31% of the 3,300 people who completed the survey in 2018 rated their lake as very safe because of boats traveling at high speeds and creating large wakes that can endanger others. Consistently, we hear that boaters need to be aware of what's going on outside of their boats and know the rules of the water. In an effort to address these concerns, we are creating a pilot project just down the way from this chamber on the Indian River and Mirror Lake, which, as you know, is close by. Here we will test some tactics for controlling unsafe and unaware boating. Then we will use what we learn to improve the tactics and deploy them around the rest of Muskoka and hopefully beyond. In October 2019, we conducted a survey of the residents of the Mirror Lake and Lake Muskoka and Indian River. We received over 60 responses, and 90% were concerned or very concerned about the impact of wakes. More were concerned about the lack of safety of boat safety knowledge. Over 85% said there should be more buoys, and 80% there should be more signage in the area. This survey shows that we have strong support from the residents of the area. And although Transport Canada sets the speed limit on our lakes and the OPP enforces those, the township is responsible for producing, posting, and maintaining speed limit signage. As a result, we are asking for council's approval for the township to take 4 steps to help with the project over and above your kind current support of Safe Quiet Lakes. Number 1 is to erect and replace the 9-kilometer-an-hour signs with a heavy concentration on the pilot project area. Number 2 is to work with us to procure or produce some no-wake signage to be distributed in the pilot project area on private property. And number 3 is to support the installation of no-wake buoys at key intervals in the Indian River and Muskoka Lakes, along with some radar equipment. We would also like you to support community outreach initiatives such as a May long weekend launch, social media, traditional media outreach, and educational outreach through campaigns at local establishments in the summer months. The Muskoka Lakes Association is also participating in this pilot project and has agreed to supply and install a radar device that will show boaters the speed they are traveling along the river. This will be similar to the MLA's radar device that has been in the Little Joe River for the last 5 years. We will work with the OPP to find the best places to put this. So if we have a few mock-ups that we have, so this is the buoys that would be MTO approved that we would use in some of the places where people are putting makeshift buoys right now already. And then we also, those are some of the places, it's not scientific right now, where we might put some of these buoys at the beginning, the entrance and exit of Mirror Lake, close to the Hannah Park, and one right at the mouth of Muskoka. And then we would also look perhaps on the Rosso side as well. We thought the wake signage that we were looking at, we want to make sure that we remind people that some of the traffic calming techniques that have been used in the city or on the roadways as well, and remind people of the nature that they're disrupting, as well as the potential danger to children and families who are using the waterway. Paddle boarders share the space. So we have a lot of next steps to do, and I hope with your support. The evidence shows that people are passionate about our lake environment, and we hope you'll support our pilot project. And additionally, we invite all councillors to attend our stakeholder meeting on April 20th, just across the way from 9 to 1. Thank you for your time. I would be pleased to answer any questions, and I hope for your support.
Good, thank you, Colleen. Excellent presentation. Committee, any thoughts, observations, questions of Colleen at this point before we, I suppose, discuss this further? Mayor?
Thank you, and thanks, Colleen. Thanks to Safe Quiet for all their hard work. Some of the signage, and I don't know where I saw it recently, I believe Seguin going into Rosso uses 0, and they use the number 0 wake on some of their signage. And it struck me as extremely effective. I appreciate the 9 kilometer. I'm not sure what the feedback's been on the radar boards going through Joe River. I've gone through them, don't really notice because I'm, especially where they are at the super choke points, people are usually going extremely slow. It's the middle areas, I think, that would cause greater concern. And are they just, I can't remember, do they flash 10 or 20 kilometers an hour, 30 kilometers an hour, which all of a sudden they just see what my boat speed I'm actually doing or check my speedometer, versus flashing too fast kind of thing. So have you considered the 0 wake and literally the 0, that signage? I'd love to know from a focus group, is it effective? It seems to me that it has some incredible impact. And then number 2, what's the idea on the flashing sign?
So in terms of, we were under the impression that a wake sign couldn't look too official. So I'll have to research the 0 wake sign. The 9 kilometer signs, the speed need to come, I have an actual call at 10:30 with the signage person in Ottawa to talk about what signage is actually really allowed and what the township could or could not erect in terms of, does it have to be a 9 kilometer sign that they mandate, that they've created. We would certainly look at a 0 wake instead of our sort of more kinder, gentler versions that we have there. We could certainly look at it if it was deemed okay, that if it looked official, we could certainly add that to the mix. Okay,
just a comment. I think we need to be less kinder, gentler, and more direct.
Oh. Hearing you, that's great feedback. I'd like to be tougher too.
Good. Councillor Kelly?
Thank you. Through you, great work. We need to do more of it, and I'm going to absolutely support what the mayor said. The kinder, gentler doesn't appear to be working, so we need to be abrupt and rude about it, perhaps. Just a couple of thoughts. I like the speed sign thing, but I will tell you, if you go on YouTube, you can see pictures, videos taken on people in cars coming down Peninsula Road, trying to get the sign up as high as they can. And so those road signs that post your actual speed can be abused as much as they can be honored or respected. That's why maybe flashing too fast is a little more appropriate than telling the whole world that I managed to hit 83 kilometers an hour going through that channel. Number two, the speed signs you're talking about are going to go up on private property? Is it
We'll
my
replace where
understanding
they
or
were. A lot
misunderstanding?
of them were previously on private property.
Yeah, I'll be interested to hear what you hear from Ottawa in terms of the signs that they prescribe. If it's on private property, I'm not going to give any opinions on this, but I will tell you, bigger, better, louder, flashier, more abrupt. I'm not exactly sure, they're not official signs, right? We're not trying to replace the speed signs that were put up by Transport Canada. We're
Right.
supplementing them with our own. I don't know how far wrong you can go. The flip side of it is, and I have to tell you, the lawyer in me is curious, do we have some kind of liability insurance in case somebody hits one of these markers or hits one of these buoys? I mean, is there a possibility that we could find ourselves in jeopardy if we have these things floating permanently anchored in the middle of a navigable waterway? Do we have any kind of liability if somebody whacks into them?
So we've been working with some lawyers that we have in our, as our friends, and we are hoping that they would be, we're working, that they would actually be privately responsible, so that someone put it out and then that we would work with them to ensure their insurance covered it. As for the radar, I'm meeting with the OPP on the 25th in Bracebridge to talk about the new radar system. The MLA hasn't procured it yet, so we could potentially make one that just buy the one that flashes that isn't the same as the one in the Little Joe River.
Thank you. So we're heavy users in the corridor, let's call it, from Lake Muskoka to Port Carling. I see two things. First of all, Mirror Lake is its own entity. And to me, it is a bit of a dichotomy. I don't know how, if all the respondents, the 60, 90 people surveyed are from the lake, if I could isolate it to that lake. What I find is when we get in and out of Mirror Lake, as we go through Mirror Lake, there's all kinds of water sports activity. I don't know whether that's transient, people are coming from port, they jump out of their boats, they water ski, wakeboard, whatever, surf, and then out they go to their cottage on Lake Muskoka. So I don't know how, that's heavy usage lake. You get into that and you're simply going from point A to point B to get out into Muskoka, and you're having to stop because there's boats going, it is heavy. So to my mind, are you suggesting that Mirror Lake itself needs to be throttled back? Is that what you're, and I'm having trouble envisioning that, because what is it,
It
a
would be-
lane all
it's
the way
a-
through?
Yeah, I know that some of my neighbors would get really, really angry if we said no more towing in Mirror Lake. I don't think that it's possible. I believe in my childhood, someone tried to do it and there was a kerfuffle. I made sure that the survey was completed by people across the system. I was out all over Thanksgiving, hiking up and down, knocking on doors to make sure that I had a good representation, not just on Mirror Lake. I think what our concerns are the speeding up too early and too late in the lake, really impacting the erosion and the people there. I don't know if you could, we would love people to be more aware of the paddlers that are on that lake, and that's where the education comes in, getting people to be aware outside of their boat that there are people being towed, that there are kayaks and all multi-use on that lake, because right now it's, as you know, a free-for-all.
It is. So your ask, it's an interesting one. I think clearly everyone would be supportive of it. If I had a concern, it's, I think to Councillor Kelly's point too, signs all the way up and down the river, and how does that look to our Muskoka? The signs are tasteful, but then if they fit into the landscape, you don't see the 0 or the 9. My boat doesn't go 9 kilometers an hour, so there's a judgmental piece to so many. It doesn't. My point is, it doesn't register on the gauge. Most boats don't, and so you're left to people's discretion, and I think that's where you're putting your hands up and saying we've got to get better at this. So perhaps ingress, egress into Mirror Lake, further out, more of a channel, so that people realize they shouldn't be just heading out. Certainly support all of that. What would you expect of us? How do you see your ask rolling out to this committee and to this council?
Well, I'm unaware of what the price to procure the Ministry of Transport signs are, whether you could print your own signs. After my call, I might know a little bit more in Ottawa, whether they make you buy theirs or we can print theirs. We are going to undertake doing wake signage. I would love to, right now we have some quotes. We'll redesign and be a little bit more aggressive in our net zero wake things. So I just didn't know if it was a possibility for you to print the signs, or I'm not sure about that. That was the thing. So that is why there's not a direct monetary ask.
I would ask our mayor and our CAO, is this the kind of thing we could establish an actual task force or a designated person either from this committee or from council or from staff to work and liaise, so we could fashion a mutual response working with the MLA and Safe Quiet Lakes?
Well, if I may, I do know we have a print shop. We do our own road signage at times. We have the ability to probably produce these signs pretty simply. And I think as direction from this committee to council to say we would supply you with 25 9-kilometer-an-hour signs, I think would go a long way for this test pilot. And, we can have Colleen work with our Director of Public Works and just execute the signs based on this committee and council's direction. I don't think we need to overly complicate things at the end of the day. You guys are going to install them. You're going to find out where they're going to go because you're contacting the people for private property. And anyway,
Would these be land-based?
I think they're land-based.
So you're gonna, so
Boathouse
you'll,
base.
okay, so you'll handle those floating aspects, the floaters, if you will, the in-water installation of pieces that you fashioned as a result of discussing with the federal government?
Sure, certainly.
Okay.
And what I also ask for your support in the summer months. Hopefully people would come to our launch, or if you could outreach on social media or include our messaging
Absolutely.
in your things, that would be important
Okay,
as well.
Councillor Edwards? Or,
Thank you, through you.
Roberts?
I don't know whether it's too late, but there's the community grant program where you can get up to $2,500.
We applied for, yes, we're thankful for that ability to apply for that.
That'll happen in due course. Mayor?
I'll ask a comment, thank you, through you, I guess, to the rest of the committee. Do we want to have Muskoka Lake signage on these or leave them generic? My indication is more, there's no TML signage on them, that we leave it as official looking or whatever designed as possible. I think from a liability perspective, we're supporting you in this effort. But I agree, as soon as something is placed in the water in particular, there is a liability associated, and as soon as our name is on that, there's a liability associated. So I think I just want to get committee's general feeling on it. Mine is that help to supply this, but there's no TML branding in any way, shape, or form.
Okay. Councillor?
Yes, I don't think we need our township logo on it, just like a generic sign's probably better.
Good, thank you.
Thank you. Just a quick response. I agree with both of the submissions. I think the more it looks like a real generic speed sign, the more likely it will be obeyed. If it looks like a promotion or an advertisement, it'll be ignored. I just have a quick question. Have you ever asked for support away from the water? Have we ever addressed, for instance, we've got all this welcome to Muskoka, the Township of Muskoka Lake signage, and we sometimes have banners underneath them. Why doesn't it say stop wake? Why doesn't every boat launch ramp have a stop wake, no wake, we're watching you thing? Why don't we, it does? No.
Yeah.
Oh. Well, maybe they need to be bigger and in English, and I'll see them. All right, well, let's make sure we're doing everything we can.
I agree with, there has been certain municipalities that have used used land and the highway system to remind people of their behavior on the boat, on the water.
Good, Councillor Mazan? Yeah, Jerry.
I just wanted to add that I think also having our logo on there, it implies then we'd have the responsibility to enforce, which we clearly know we can't. So just, most people are still struggling with that equation. So I agree with no logos.
Good. Okay, thank you. I think we're going to have a quick chat here, but it would appear that our direction would be to provide signage in support of the effort as a partner. And how that shapes up, I'm not quite certain. We'll certainly direct staff to work and liaise with you on that particular piece. I don't know if we're going to have an actual resolution to that effect. I'll leave that to the CAO.
Mr. Chair, that's at the discretion of the committee. It would certainly be helpful for staff to provide that direction through resolution later on in the meeting, should you wish.
Okay, so I think we should have a resolution, in fact, to declare our support and actually define what that is. So I guess we could do that. Can we do that now? We would. At break?
Certainly, whenever you wish, Mr. Chair.
I think we should do it now. Just perhaps take a few moments, and then it's done. It's fresh. It's in our minds. I guess we would maybe take we don't need a break, but you're right. I would like to define it. Perhaps we could have just a quick open session here then and discuss. Perhaps somebody could take down the points. Mayor?
If I may help, I think the resolution should read that the Township of Muskoka Lakes recommends to council, or committee recommends to council, that we would supply 25 9-kilometer signs. I think 25 would more than do you and help for a few years. Pick the 25 signs. I don't know specific signs. We're not talking 4x8 sheets. We're talking
The 9 kilometers.
9-kilometer standard signs. That's number one. And then number two, that where appropriate, council and the Township of Muskoka Lakes would be involved for initiatives for social media outreach to deliver the same message. I think those are the two really big asks that we have the ability to affect a change, if that's okay. And I'm more than happy to help move that, or I'm sure someone
Anything
will
else?
second
Any, Councillor?
Just could say, I'll gladly second that. I think it's a good idea, and you're doing lots of good work.
Thank you.
Okay, others? Any thoughts? Pause for a moment.
Great.
While we,
Oh,
yeah, you
thank
can have a seat.
So, all right, well, I just, the direction I see is that we would, you all agree that we need a little bit more aggressive no wake signs, and we'll work on those, and hopefully you'll see them soon.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, well, I guess we can come back to that. Potentially, we can move on here to our next piece. I'm going to move on, while you do that.
Okay.
Is that right? Okay, so I'm going to call on our Director of Public Works, Ken Becking, to present his report on the waiving of fees for the use of community centers. Ken?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Further to direction given at the last meeting, staff have compiled a background report to give context to the current practices and policies in effect. The whole matter was precipitated, of course, by the delegation from Ms. Jody Gilles Paxton, representing the Peninsula Lions Club, requesting a waiving of fees. for a couple of events that they're proposing to hold in July and October of this year. Just to try and put some context around this, the community centers, of which there are 12, represent about $500,000 in terms of a book of business. That's the sort of hard fixed costs that are associated with operating our community centers. The most recent policy was created in July of 2018, and it allows for a waiving of fees by 50% for certain groups and events. That has been in place, as the report says, for 2 years. It's been used liberally in all of our community centers, and it's consistent with the strategic direction previously granted by, or given by council, and that we wanted to encourage the use of our community centers. With respect to the request that was made of you, what is being requested at the end of the day is that council agree to waive $210 charge, which is the other 50% of the fee for the July event, and $270 for the October event. The request is not unusual. We receive many of them every year. Some groups do request a complete waiving of fees, some do not. It's at the discretion of the applicants. From a financial point of view, as I've said, the expenditure or the cost of running our facilities is about $450,000 a year. Use of the center's fees generate approximately $31,500 in a year. Our community centers are occupied about 13% of the time, and the break-even cost for operating our facility on a daily basis would be about $750 a year. In terms of the financial impact of the current policy, the value of fees not collected as a result, or the opportunity cost, if you will, represents $173,000 a year. That is the extent to which council is already subsidizing the use of our community centers. And in fact, we have similar policies that apply to our parks and, frankly, to our arenas, although I haven't included that in the analysis in the report. So there is already a substantial benefit that is accruing to the community and the use of the community centers. With that, Mr. Chairman, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Good, thank you. Okay, committee, there's a number of pieces to this puzzle, I believe. First of all, that we actually have a policy in place now, and we're simply exercising that policy. Perhaps there's a certain, if I might use the word, ignorance factor to what the policy really is, and the contributory aspect to it that the township, this corporation, currently takes a position of. So I'm looking for some fulsome discussion around this table about this very thing. I mean, the recommendation on our documents is that we receive the report, that we not waive the fees for the Peninsula Lions Club, and that, in fact, council gives staff direction if they do wish to have the current policy amended. And I have spoken to some of you over these past days, and it seems to me that what I'm hearing is there's a confusion aspect to how much we should give, and as people come sort of a very ad hoc thing over the year, as our Director of Public Works, has indicated people do come throughout the year and ask for all of it to be waived, some of it to be waived, and there's absolutely no consistency whatsoever, really, other than we do have a policy in place that if we simply executed it and it was a staff function, if you will, then we wouldn't even, people wouldn't even be delegating on the agenda. For example, a hockey, whether it's a hockey, whatever it is, as a fundraising charitable, we all want to be seen as being receptive, working with the community, we are the community, to create the best environment for fundraising and community support. So I would ask you your thoughts on that here and now. Councilor Nishikawa?
First of all, it's unfortunate that we're not looking at this during the time of budget. And that's where it's most important, when you actually see, the numbers sound really huge right now, but in fact, percentage-wise, and again, remembering what we offer to the community for their taxes, that's where some of this comes in. I think that this particular application is, the price, the cost of it, is because of that alcohol is involved. So you have to understand that there's different policy. Well, I'll just say that there are different policies based on whether there's alcohol involved or whether we waive. So for instance, not just kids' birthday parties, many community things we waive, and it doesn't come to this committee. As soon as alcohol is involved, that changes. So I'm not aware that alcohol is not involved or what that, but, and again, lots of work went into this particular draft. We can spend another year or two doing it again. But I think it actually works, and I don't see that. The only thing I would suggest, and I've said this in the past, was we would see groups that would get a grant, so they'd be approved sometimes a pretty hefty grant. Two particular groups come to mind. And then they would come and ask for fees to be waived. And then there would be constantly these asks from those same individual groups. So that's what I would be looking at. I think it works pretty good, the way it is right now.
Good, thank you. Mayor?
Thank you. I think in this particular ask, they're not serving alcohol. They stated that when they asked us a month ago. So here's my Cole's notes. Costs us $447,000 a year to operate our community centers. We do not even recuperate 10% of that. We get $31,000 a year. Of the revenue we could be achieving, a little over $210,000, we're only getting $31,000. We're not even getting 20% type of thing. We're giving away 80% already in grants. The policy more than works. I think we need to stick to the policy.
Thank you. Others? Councillor?
Yeah, that's right. I agree, and I think your comment about inconsistencies that's because we're not applying the policy consistently, and it needs to be applied consistently.
Councillor Roberts?
It appears to me we are applying it consistently. Last evening, I went through all the minutes from 2018 December, and if my numbers could be wrong, but I searched on the word waive, and I searched on the word rental. Including the one today, we've only done it 4 times. So the $173,000 is waived due to what the policy says. In the interpretation, if my numbers are correct. So I'm not displeased with people coming. They're only coming 4 times in a calendar year, or in a year. That's not, and you're only talking $210 in this incident. It's probably the most expensive one. It's not a lot of money.
I think, yeah, thank you. In converse to that is, of course, the whole idea that here we are talking about this, and we're $210, $485, when, in fact, we do have a policy in place that can work if we let it work. I'm not sure how the people even get here, other than they come here as a delegate, and they ask with all the emotion and the personal aspect to it, and one considers it. And I don't think it should, personally, and maybe I wasn't asked my opinion, but I don't even think it should be in a general meeting sense. I think it should be, someone comes in the front door, they ask for a staff person who is responsible for this kind of thing. They ask and they say, can we get some sort of a special dispensation for our particular event? And I suppose the answer is no. The answer is, but here's what you're getting, what you will get, what you always get, what everyone gets as a township participant, as a tax-paying resident. And I think that's the issue, is the exercise. I think the thing works. It does work. I agree, 100%. But
no, but, sorry. But you will have these four-offs, I guess, if you want to call it that. And then it's also, look at the event. Is this a group that is actually contributing back to the community? Again, I always looked at the community, the functions and things that happen at the community centers are often things that we are not offering as a municipality, where other municipalities offer programming and things. So these groups sometimes are filling those voids that we are not stepping up for. Again, for $200, I don't know if I would be making a big deal out of it. But.
Councillor Kelly, thank you.
Thank you, and through you, in response to your comment, I think it works well the way it is, and as long as the policy is clearly describes when it should be applied, as long as the terms of reference and the ability to waive are very clearly identified, I have no problem delegating that authority to somebody other than this body to deal with if it's a $200 issue.
Councillor Bazan?
Sorry, I would just like to add, the one thing I've been hearing for the last year is that our job is to set policy and then have staff go and execute. So I'm getting a bit confused myself. This is one time where I'm feeling like we have got a well-considered and thought-out policy that has been done by some of my peers around this table. There seems to be this nodding of head, and there may be some tweaking, maybe to some of the language to make sure it's but in this particular case, it feels to me we have a policy, and I think the discomfort some of us have been having is that we're stepping outside of those bounds sometimes and making those decisions. And so I think this time there's a policy, and we should be sticking to it consistently.
Councillor?
I would say we should be changing the policy as of now, for the simple fact that the lady was asking for. She lives in the area, so she's a taxpayer. She's not complaining about her taxes going up. They're raising money for the food bank to help people. All of these people, whether they're the Lions or anything else like that, they're tax-paying citizens here, and we should be encouraging them to volunteer their time to raise funds and everything else like that. We're nickel and diming people. No wonder you can't get volunteers. You don't get any young volunteers anymore. It's all the older people that have done it for years. And we put roadblocks in every time. Why should somebody have to come and beg for $210? And I think it's an insult to us. We are not a business, we're a service, and we should be looking after the people. That's my opinion, but I would waive the fees for the Lions, for the Women's Institute, and all of these groups that are doing community service. If we had to pay somebody to do that, as somebody said, if you're running programs in other areas, they pay people to do some of this stuff. I've seen the district with the NIA program, they run it here or there, and they drop it, and people don't go. So you're keeping people out of hospitals if they're doing exercise programs and everything. So I would waive the fees, change the policy.
Good input, thank you. Mayor?
I think we already are contributing in many respects to the community. We're putting $410,000 a year to provide facilities and expenses for the community to have these kinds of things. I appreciate they only want $210. We're already giving them $210 because they're already at a half-price fee based on policy. Not everything comes to this committee. It's only when they want to go outside of the policy. So if a group comes in and they're entitled to a 50% rebate, they get the 50% rebate. A few people a year say, we'd like more. A policy was in place saying this would entitle you to more. There's already a policy in place that says this entitles you to half. And that's where these people are at. So again, we can change that policy and say all these people are now free. But I think the true number to me is we're already giving away $173,000 a year based on this policy. For people who are coming in without coming and asking council, maybe a few people, maybe that's another $210, but $173,000 is just happening because of this policy giving back to the community. So, again, I'm not sure what makes, everyone has their plea and everyone has their passions, and this is why we want, and we all sit there. But I'd like to look at the language necessarily then if we need to adapt this policy, but I think it's been working pretty well, is my 30,000-foot view, and understanding, again, we're already giving $410,000 to this community.
Thank you, Mayor. Councilor Nishikawa?
Thank you. And again, to my point, are we just having this discussion so that we can avoid these people coming to this council? Or to these?
I wouldn't say that at all, no.
Well, so it's just that that's kind of what I was hearing was that we want to change the policy so they don't have to come here. But so again, and the other thing I really want to stress is we did consider about the 50%, and I'm not saying that swing on this particular ask, but we do have to consider that when you have these big events and things that there's a lot of custodian time that has to go into it. And so we're trying to at least recoup some of those costs. Or there has to be a fee. Like, so then again, another policy adjustment, if you're gonna waive everything, there still has to be a fee of whatever it's gonna cost to clean that place up.
Right.
Because it's not, the users don't have the ability to do the proper cleaning that our staff does.
Thank you. I do think this is a very relevant topic to air out here and now, as it is on our agenda. It's come back on our agenda from last month. And maybe just to refresh everyone, in the recommendation that this committee is considering this morning, it does say that the committee would receive the report for information purposes, that the council not waive the fees as requested by the Peninsula Lions Club, and that council gives staff direction if they wish to have the current policy amended. So kind of an onerous task on us here this morning. It is important that if we embrace this, I read the motion. If we don't embrace it, we want to go to C, which is give staff direction to change the current policy. Then what language might that be? I'm hearing from Councillor Edwards, I'm hearing from Councillor Nishikawa. You know, it's a different philosophy than, if you will, from the mayor. Where can we seek some sort of consensus here as to, do we just leave everything status quo, people come in, everything's fine, and we just move on? I think what I was hearing from many folks was that there's a real dichotomy of, it's a hockey event, and it's wonderful, and here they are in front of us today, and it's a yes-no, and it's an emotional yes-no, and yet we're here running a business, trying to stick to reports, stick to, bylaws, and so that's where I'm confused. And so I wonder if the committee isn't as well. I mean, I would like to give some direction. I'm not sure what that is. Do we ask for a bylaw? Do we change the language in the current policy? Or does that stick and we move on and we don't honor the Lions Club and we don't honor the hockey request of this morning? I mean, here we are. Do we stick to our policy, or do we vary from a policy case by case, whether it's 4 or 12 next year? Maybe because we say yes to all 4, next year 8, and then there's 11, and then, so that's where this discussion is at this point. Mayor?
Thank you. I'll give you my perspective. Lions Club in particular, I'm not in favor of waiving because we're already waiving half of the fees. The hockey, I don't know whether they qualify for a discounted rate currently or not. So that's a question before I would consider, do we want to discount them? Because we have a policy that provides some discounts. They may not fit into those categories, at which point they would have every right to come and say, hey, here's what we're doing. It doesn't fit the boxes, and that's why we'd like more. My concern, and I appreciate Councillor Everett's perspective on taxpayers and giving, and they have, they're doing good for the community. If this summer my son wanted to get married at the community center, and because they're environmentally conscious as opposed to gifts for the bride and groom, they decided to donate money to the West Muskoka Food Bank, does that mean we waive the fees?
If there's no alcohol, he's more than welcome.
But if they have alcohol, no, but to waive the fees, again, I have no issue if there's an individual counselor that wants to go through and try and tweak some language or change this policy. Maybe everything's free. But there's a policy in play that I believe generally works, but some may not. So at this point, I'm not into our council or committee redirecting staff to change the policy or amend it unless there's a specific ask or language that they don't like that helps identify this.
Yeah, if I might, I would ask the Director of Public Works, Ken, if you could speak to the hockey, that hockey ask of this morning from that perspective.
I can't say with absolute certainty that the same policies apply, but I do believe that they do, based on other instances that I've had to deal with. So in effect, if it's a service club or it's a community group, and there's no alcohol, then a 50% reduction does apply. If committee would like an absolute answer, if you want to take a break, I can pop downstairs and ask some questions and come back with a definitive answer for you. But generally speaking, we take what I will call a liberal interpretation of the existing policy. You'll notice that there is a spreadsheet in there that says, if this, then that. It's a fairly extensive spreadsheet. That having been said, I can think of probably 10 or 15 instances where the situation was not didn't exactly fit into some box over the course of the last year and a bit. And as I said, we take a fairly liberal or generous interpretation of the policy to make sure that people are being treated fairly and that there is some consistency across the board. I think that's the best I can say, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Kelly.
Thank you, through you. Just two or three thoughts. These are really, many of these things are really small. They're lots of work and lots of effort that's undertaken by volunteers, but the gain here, the result is usually very small. If I understood Jody Gilles correctly, we had some food donated to the last hockey game and $100. So we run the risk, if we stick to this policy, of being the single largest beneficiary of any fundraising effort that goes on in our community centers, arenas, or parks. And I think that's atrocious. This stuff is part of the fabric of being in a small town, in a small community. I'm going to pick up on Councillor Edwards' thoughts. We should celebrate the effort of local volunteers to try to make a difference, even if it only results in $100 or $200. And these are public assets that are held on behalf of our constituents. We've got to make them available when the time is right for people to use in an appropriate manner. And I think the community building, the last thing I want to say, I did attend the last hockey game, and I'm not a hockey guy, but it was amusing, it was fun, it was interesting to watch the old-timer Muskoka Rock. Chief Morrell should have been there, the fire guys. It was spirited, it was animated, it was community building. There was at least 100 or 150 people watching the thing. It was truly part of creating this community, this permanent community in the dead of winter. And I have no doubt that this will have the same impact. And I just think that the risk is, for $200, A, the event won't happen, because that's just going to be the tipping point where this doesn't make any sense to do it. And B, we're going to end up being the single largest beneficiary of whatever they get in the way of donations and support. On their ledger, Township of Muskoka Lakes will make out better than the rest.
Others? Any other thoughts? Okay, so, again, the dichotomy is, the Lions Club, Peninsula Lions Club, we say no to, and yet the hockey piece we're particularly sensitive to, so we say yes to that. I'm wondering, again, to Councilor Nishikawa's point, budget is here, and certainly at the end of the day, we have to separate what the costs are from what that, if you will, that benevolence factor is, if you will, from this council, this committee, from this building, in terms of to the community. So, I'm confused by, what I'm particularly confused by is the inconsistency. Perhaps I'm looking for way too much. Maybe there shouldn't be, and it doesn't need to be an inconsistency. But if we take every one of the asks at its own merit, they all have merit. So we should simply revise the policy that we currently respect and have that new language in there. And if that's the case, then I would ask the committee, Councillor Kelly has some great comments, the mayor, yourself, Councillor Edwards, what should the language be? Or should we put that off until budget? And, we need to deal with it today, one would think. Councillor, you had your hand up.
Yes, I think in the beginning, the policy was written to identify the difference between community groups and service groups, and to identify that community groups that were using the community center could use it for free as long as there was no alcohol involved. There are certain circumstances where they do pay, but it's a minimal amount. Service groups, however, may cover a larger area than just our area, and the benefit to them may go outside of our area. We don't know when this happens. Sometimes it stays within Muskoka Lakes, sometimes the profits go out. And I think you want to look at those two different groups because they answer to different people. The community groups answer to the community, whereas the service groups answer to the Lions or to the Rotary or to whatever. And I think they're already getting a 50% reduction. Our charge to them is covering the cost of the caretaker fees, and that's just about it. So I think that we have to work on being consistent. There will be exceptions where somebody comes in and says, hey, we're not going to make absolutely no money, we're doing it for the fun of the community, please can you waive the fees, and we can look at it then. But I think that we have to work harder at being consistent and enforcing the rules that are there, and if the rules don't work, then we ought to change them.
Councillor Nishikawa?
It hasn't been said, but that's how I'm interpreting it, that we want to change the policy because we don't want these types of things to come forward to this committee. That's how I'm interpreting what has been said, because there is no reason to change the policy. The policy, it actually does work. The difficulty would be, it would be incredibly difficult. I've been involved in situations with Annette. It would have been very challenging for her to make a decision, a staff decision, on whether to allow an event or waiving of fees and that type of thing. I don't believe that it's up to staff. I believe that it is up to this council. And that's why I'm concerned that there's a request to change policy and to allow or do whatever, because in fact, you're then putting, again, staff in a very tough position to say many times, like we may not all be aware of it, but there are many users of the community center that come from outside the area. For instance, some of the district programming that we've brought forward. And then also the why, like there's a lot of other groups that are using the community centers. And where this all gets difficult, again, is staff trying to decide, does this group fit this box? Because I don't think we've really have a great checklist. We thought we did, but apparently in the whole policy, there seems to be some issues. I'm just really concerned that we are trying to put something back on staff. And in fact, I'm happy to hear groups come forward. Then I would get a better feel for what's really happening in the
Good,
community.
thank you. I would say to you, before I call on the others, if I might, and perhaps this is a little unorthodox, but so given what's in front of us today, we have the Peninsula Lions Club in front of us deliberating whether we should or should not waive those fees, given our policy. And then we have the people sitting in the audience asking for that particular request. And again, not to put you horribly on the spot, but are those two decisions yes and yes? We should help out the Peninsula Club, we should help out the hockey, or we should not waive the, and so that's, I think what I'm thinking, sorry, personally, to try to lead you guys is in consistency, and maybe you're saying, what I'm hearing you say is there can't be consistency because it's a one-by-one consideration. And I don't know what that criteria then becomes.
I believe you do have to look at it individually, those particular asks. Those that
what happens with the Peninsula Lions Club versus the hockey ask?
we make the decision. So you would ask what my opinion is. I would be waiving the fees. I also know what effect those
Sure.
groups have on the community. If another group comes from, I'll just say that has a little bit more private enterprise involved, I would look at this a little differently.
Okay, good.
But
Thank you.
these particular groups are community interest groups, and I've seen the effects that they do in the community.
Okay, good. Thank you. Councillor Kelly?
Just two last thoughts. I've never in my 30 years in private industry witnessed a company succeeding because of cost containment alone. And if we're talking about cost recovery here, and we're not talking about how we're going to drive paying business people, attracting people to come in and use our facilities for, entertainment purposes or for business-based sides of things, the Economic Development Committee needs to get, its hands on that and make that a part of its mandate. But let's make $200 in cost write-offs irrelevant against the opportunity that exists out there to fill the places that we have available to us, more completely by driving this place as a place to come for conferences or a place to come for smaller than that. There was a circus in here, I think, last year, wasn't there, for 2 or 3 days? Literally a circus. So I'm embarrassed that we think cost containment is a way to drive ourselves. We got to focus equally on growing the business. The other thing I want to just correct one, record. When we say we're not going to support the Lions Club in Peninsula, and I'm not a member of the Lions Club in Peninsula, but I do know how that club operates. We're not hurting them at all. It's just $210 less they have to distribute back to the community. Every single penny, every beer bottle they chase out of the snowbank, an Everly Road dump, goes back to the community. They don't spend a nickel on their own entertainment, on their own, their meetings are usually around a dinner. It's paid for by each of the members. So don't kid yourself into thinking that it's just the Lions Club, they can absorb it. It's just $210 less that goes back into the community to support whatever good work they do.
Thank you. Councillor Bridgman?
Just a different thought. So I believe we have a policy that is working well, but as taxpayers, I believe they have a right to appeal. And the appeal is what you're seeing 4 times a year. And so the policy is good. It's working. And so the appeal comes forward, and I agree with Councillor Nishikawa. That becomes a political decision whether we go off policy or not. It's not a staff decision. And so it's heard on each merit, and we make a decision on what it is. And that's how I think it works.
Okay, thank you. Councillor?
Just a last comment. You're talking $210. It's cost more than staff time sitting here arguing for the $210. If we really want to save money, we would just give the service groups free rein, because they're putting the money, as Councillor Kelly said, they're putting money back into the community. Every penny goes in, and we're nickel and diming them. And like I say, we spend more on staff time than that. Service groups, as long as they're not serving alcohol at an event, it should be waived, because that's why it's taking so much time, our time, staff time, and that for what, for $210? Sorry, I don't know.
Okay, good, thank you. I do hope that it's a larger focus than that, certainly, but I do understand your direction. So, okay, so to take this thing and to move it along, I do have a recommendation here, but I don't think we have consensus in terms of the Peninsula Lions Club. I mean, I hear what you're saying. It seems to me, you're saying, let's just waive the fees. I think Councilor Nishikawa, so the voting members of this committee who have a yay, nay, who are here, I'm uncertain as to whether to read the motion just as it is, because I'm hearing, Councilor Kelly, yourself, that you'd rather waive some of these fees, which means that we need new language in an existing bylaw, and that's a heavier lift.
To answer that,
Yeah, well, we did.
I would waive the Lions Club fees now. I would waive the arena fee at this time. If council wants to have people come in 4 times a year or something like that, I don't have a problem waiving it and that, but it's just a case of waiving it. It's just not staff time.
Okay, good. Mayor?
Just a comment. Number one, I'd like to understand the hockey. Are we giving a discount or not? My perspective on the Lions Club is we are already giving them a discount of $210. That follows our policy, which follows consistency. I do not need to give them more than the $210. They've asked for more. I have not heard a compelling argument how they're different than other people doing the same kinds of things, except for the fact they showed up here one day. And we have lots of people, $174,000 annually of people just following the system to get discounts. So I'm in favor of the resolution on this particular case, that we are giving them a discount of $210 already. Let's not forget that. They want more. So,
Duly noted. CAO?
Mr. Chair, given the mayor's question, it may be appropriate to take a break. I also think that given that we have a variety of questions in front of us, it may be advantageous to sort of separate the questions, i.e. do we want to revise the policy? What do we feel about the Lions Club resolution or the request? How do we feel about the Hockey Association request?
I agree.
Okay.
Let's take a 10-minute break.
Because the event will happen before the end of,
Exactly.
before the next
Good.
council meeting.
Thank you. I'm going to read a number of resolutions here. Sorry, Councillor?
Through you to Mr. Becking, what is the actual price that they would be charged?
I think it's about $250 an hour.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to read a number of resolutions here, and then after 2 of them, I'm going to ask the CAO to provide a comment before I read the 3rd one on this topic. So, moved by Councillor Edwards, seconded by Councillor Mazan, be it resolved that the General Finance Committee recommend to Township Council that the March 11th, 2020 staff report regarding fees for the use of community centers be received for information purposes. All those in favor? Good, that's carried unanimously. What's this say, Mayor?
I'll strike it out.
Okay. It's a good feeling. Okay. Okay, moved by Councillor Hayes, seconded by Councillor Kelly. Be it resolved that the General Finance Committee recommend to Township Council that the community center rental fees as requested by the Lions Club be waived. All those in favor? Those opposed? Okay, that's carried. Are you going to do the... You'll do that. Okay, before I read this third one about the actual policies, I'm going to ask the CAO to comment.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. So my comments sort of reflect what you heard from Councillors Nishikawa as well as Bridgman. And I'm going to give you an analogy as it relates to amending policy. So if you think about it in terms of a planning standard, say a zoning standard, if you've got a stream of applications every meeting with respect to changing a particular standard, you know the standard's not working and you need to change it. But if there are more one-offs as it relates to that standard, then it's probably appropriate to evaluate those requests as they come in. So my suggestion to you would be in that context, given the number of requests that you've had to change this policy, it's probably appropriate, and it's probably appropriate that you evaluate those requests on a one-off basis. If for some reason they change and we get, you know, a whole stream of them, I would suggest to you at that point, it may be appropriate to revisit the policy.
Good, thank you. Good commentary. I'm going to read a third resolution, moved by Councillor Hayes, seconded by Councillor Kelly. Be it resolved that the General Finance Committee recommend to Township Council that the current community center rental fee policy remain unchanged. All those in favor? All those opposed? That's carried. Thank you. Yeah, okay, a little more housekeeping here. So I'm going to read this resolution, moved by Councillor Edwards, seconded by...
Oh.
Just get that cleaned up. Thank you, Cheryl. Okay, so moved by Councillor Edwards, seconded by Councillor Mazan. Be it resolved that the General Finance Committee recommend to Township Council that the request from Muskoka Rock Minor Hockey for the waiver of arena ice time rental fees on March 28th, 2020 for a charity hockey game be approved. All those in favor? Get carried. Sorry? I'm sorry. Any opposition? Sorry. Okay, and this final resolution, moved by Councillor Edwards, seconded by Councillor Mazan. Be it resolved that the General Finance Committee recommend to Township Council that the Township supply Safe Quiet Lakes with 25 standard-sized 9-kilometer-per-hour signs, and that staff be directed to incorporate and promote Safe Quiet Lakes messaging through the Township's social media channels. All those in favor? Okay. Thank you. Okay, good, thank you. Okay, so 5B, item 5B is our Director of Public Works again, Ken Becking, regarding custodial services for the community centers. Can you have a report? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Further to, the matter went forward to council. It was referred back to committee. The issue relates to the retention of contract custodial staff to service 3 of our community centers. The Milford Bay and Foots Bay are covered under one contract. Port Carling is covered under a separate contract. In the case of Port Carling, it covers for up to 25 and a half hours every 2 weeks, per week, of custodial services. In the case of the other contract, 13 hours per week is allocated to Milford Bay, and 3.5 hours per week is allocated to the Foots Bay Community Center. Traditionally, these contracts come forward to council for execution annually. that was the case in this past year. I would note, however, that staff, through the procurement bylaw, have authority to award contracts up to $35,000 per item, and it seemed unnecessary to me that these contracts, given the value of them and their nature, that they should come forward to council for execution. That having been said, out of an abundance of caution, I wanted to make sure that you were comfortable with that decision, and so hence the reason why the matter is before you. If there are any questions, I'd be happy to try and answer.
Good, thank you. Committee, any thoughts, observations, commentary? Okay, good. With that, I'm sorry, Councillor Hayes.
The only, the only concern I had was that the two libraries, volunteer libraries in Milford Bay and Walker's Point are not included in the way that the custodial amounts are figured out, and I would like to see them included, but I think that's something to work on for a future. So.
Good, thank you. Any other comments, thoughts? Okay, good. I'm going to read this resolution, moved by Councillor Hayes, seconded by Councillor Kelly. Be it resolved that the General Finance Committee recommend to Township Council that the Director of Public Works be delegated the authority to procure custodial services for the Township's community centers, and that a contractor services agreement be prepared and the final terms be to the satisfaction of the Director of Public Works. And finally, that the Director of Public Works be authorized to sign the agreement and any necessary documentation. All those in favor? Okay, that's carried unanimously. Good, thank you. Corporate Services, 6A is a report from the Records Coordinator on Township Council policy regarding records management. Okay, I'm going to ask our clerk, Cheryl Mortimer.
So previously, we've had a records management policy, CLS08. In the summer, we retained a staff member who is our new records management coordinator. They've reviewed the policy, and with the implementation of new records management program called M-Files that we're in the process of implementing, some updates were required for the policy. A redlined version of the policy is attached along with a clean copy, so if there's any questions, I can answer. It's just a housekeeping more so than anything.
Thank you. Committee, any thoughts, comments? Okay, good. Given that, I'll read this resolution. Moved by Councillor Kelly, seconded by Councillor Hayes. Be it resolved that the General Finance Committee recommend to Township Council that the updated Township Council Policy C-LS-04 Records Management Program as presented in the March 11th, 2020 staff report be approved. All those in favor? Good, that's carried. Thank you. Okay, so we're going to accept the minutes of the Public Library Board meeting of January 14th into the record. There's no resolution for that, is there?
Just if there's questions.
Yeah, is there any questions as it relates to the minutes as indicated in the agenda for the Library Board? Okay. Good, thank you. I guess we'll move on to item 9, which would be unfinished business. We have none, as I understand it. So we'll move to item 10, which is new business. Committee, any thoughts, observations, concerns, information, new information, any new business opportunities for the General Finance Committee today? I would ask. Okay, good. Thank you. For your consideration, I guess we'll move on to read this resolution, then moved by Councillor Edwards, seconded by Councillor Kelly. Be it resolved that this meeting adjourn at 10:10 9:50 a.m. And the next regular meeting of the General Finance Committee will be held on Wednesday, April the 15th, 2020, at 9 a.m. or at the call of the chair in the council chambers, municipal office